All right. Hey guys, Pete here. I got a couple friends this week and I'm going to introduce them in a second, but we're here to talk about episode 4 of Severance's second season, Woe's Hollow. And it's a departure, that's for sure. I think I was a little less enthusiastic about some of the stuff that happened compared to my guests, but we'll get into that. So first off, the one that Aaron from Bald Move has returned. He's him and Jim have agreed to co-host this season with me, so they take turns. This week it's Aaron's turn, and I just wanted to ask you about the 24-hour, because last week you weren't here and we had
Yes.
popcorn for dinner come in. So I just wanted to get a little update on your 24-hour stream that you were busy with last week.
Yeah, that's very kind of you. We've been doing this for 8 years. On Groundhog Day weekend, we do a 24-hour movie marathon, and we did it on the extended edition Hobbit and Lord of the Rings films, Saturday noon to Sunday at noon, and we do it to raise money for the Cure Owls Fund. And we set a $35,000 goal, and we're at about 43 and counting. There's still some money trickling in from the merch and from some last minute donations. So I don't cut the check to Cure Owls until next week. It'll probably get a little bit bigger, but thanks to everybody that showed up. I know a lot of people in chat probably were here for it.
Yeah, that's crazy. When you first started that, like, doesn't that kind of blow your mind that people will give you that much money?
Regularly, my mind is blown in conjunction to what the community does for myself and my partner and things we care about. So yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, but every year I'm like, there's no way we're gonna get to 35. This is crazy. There's just no, we're gonna look like fools, and then kaboom.
I was lurking quite a bit while you guys were doing it on Twitch, but I refused to make a Twitch account, so I didn't participate in.
Well, we simultaneous stream on YouTube.
Yeah, I should have. I realized that when I was watching, but I never switched over. So I could have joined the conversation, but I just watched. You were watching. It was my main. It was like during the day for me. So you guys were in your late night. You were in the main Lord of the Ring movies at that point. So
yeah, you Vietnamese people are lucky. You got the good half during waking hours. We started the Lord of the Rings Fellowship at midnight, and it was a lot of a lot of gritty vision. Yeah.
So and viewers out there will recognize we have a new person joining us here. Heidi, you want to tell us who you are and how you ended up here today?
Sure. My name is Heidi. I have a channel on YouTube called Costume Co. And I think how I ended up here is I stalked Pete online. I sent him a message and he was very kind to answer it. And so I had you as a guest on my show talking about Silo, one of my favorite shows right now on Apple Plus. And then I hit you up again and said, hey, do you want to come and talk about Severance with me? So I think he knows I've been a big fan of this since season 1, which was like 3 years ago. It seems like forever. But anyway, yeah, that's me. And I'm also on Twitter if anyone wants to find me there.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to get into some of the costuming stuff today. We were talking a little bit beforehand. I said in the beginning, and I talked about this in my main video, I was a little... This was a tough episode for me in some ways, and it really bugged me because it's the kind of episode I really want to like. You know what I mean? Like I love the concept. I love the idea. I like a mini movie kind of thing to put in there, to break things up. And it was so hard for me to like when I was looking at the comments to the video earlier, I see people pointing out all these things and I'm like, yeah, I guess you just have to accept that, it's a suspension of disbelief thing. It's like, it seemed super weird. It seemed like it was really like there was a lot of details that didn't quite make sense, but I feel like the intention is that this really happened just as we saw it. I saw a lot of comments on my video, like maybe it was a simulation, maybe it was this, or maybe it was that, but I don't think that was the intention at all. I think the intention is that the Orpo actually happened, and it's weird because they wanted them to be scared of the outside world, after their first trip with the OTC. So that was sort of where I was at. And, we were talking before the suspension of disbelief thing. One of the things with that is like, I'm totally cool with thinking that, Seth Milchek has an outfit like that he can pull out, or they provide one for him. You know what I mean? For something like this. But then some of the other details, just had me hung up for the first half, like where I was trying to figure out, is it really happening or is it not? And it took away from the experience a bit. So let's go down the line, and why don't you guys tell me what your general thoughts on this episode was, and just the season so far, just because you haven't been here since the first week, right, Aaron?
This is true. Yeah.
Yeah. So just a brief bit about this one and the ones that you weren't here for.
So one thing you need to know about me is my absolute favorite show ever is The Leftovers on HBO.
I'm with you on that.
That show did a lot of things where it was hard to take literally true. And sometimes it was working entirely on a metaphor, sometimes on a very silly metaphor. But it still had a lot of resonant emotional truth and a lot of like really strong ideas of the character and the characters and how they'd react to things. And this is the first show since The Leftovers where I'm getting where it's like there's kind of no wrong answers with this show. Like I was set up like most people, well, we're going to get into Mark being reintegrated. And that's going to be, obviously a big part of this plot. And they completely zigged and did something completely unexpected, but that also felt real and that moved a lot of important balls forward. And it was just, I think, relentlessly watchable. It's funny, it's poignant, it's the entire sequence of like, I thought Irv was dead. I thought Irv was like,
oh yeah,
dead,
me
dead.
too.
Like he's gonna.
I heard that in your podcast earlier, and I said the same thing. Like when he laid down, I'm like, he's dead then, right? Like he can't survive.
That juxtaposed with like what Mark and Helly were doing, and then everything from Irv meeting Helly at the falls, the woe pool or whatever. That stuff was just like pulse pounding because it's like, what is going to happen? Is he going to kill her? Is he going to like force? What if because I think this episode kind of sort of talked me into like the Helly truthers are right. So I thought it was a great episode, and it, it's one of those things where it's like I feel like the show's got a lot of splaining to do, but I feel like we'll probably have this all well figured out by the end of the season. But I loved it.
Yeah, and I guess I should before you tell us what you think, Heidi, I should preface all of it with saying I think it was a very good episode of TV. You know what I mean? Like I didn't think it was a failure. I'm just saying that I had this feeling when it was going on that wasn't enjoyable. Like you brought up the Leftovers, which did that kind of, crazy episode as good as any other show that I can think of. And I don't think that this achieved that same effortlessness that something like that did. But, there could just be more that I don't know yet, and it might make sense later. So what did you think about it, Heidi?
Well, I really enjoyed it. Well, I'm loving this season so far. So there was a few observations I had just because I like watching different genres. So the first thing was when I first started watching it, it felt like an episode of Alone. I don't know if anyone's watched Alone. It's basically where you get plunked in the middle of nowhere and you have to survive. And actually there was one a couple of seasons ago where I think they did it up in the Northwest Territories or Newfoundland or something. So it was like, okay, it kind of felt like that. I understand it was New York State is I think where they did shoot it. And then the other thing was there was a couple of moments where it felt like a horror movie. Did you pick up on that at all? Especially with the guides?
The dream.
Well, the dream for sure. But even before that, with the guides, with the pointing, didn't that feel kind of like out of a horror movie? Especially Helly. Her guide was kind of horrific looking.
Yeah, we'll get into that for sure because I have some questions with them.
And then the other thing was, what was the other thing I was going to say? So I had it in my notes here. Oh yeah, and then also Irving getting lost in the woods. That also felt kind of like a horror movie to me. Like him going off, like it's sort of like horror movie 101. You know, you get isolated, you get lost from your group, and then he trips and falls and drops the flashlight. And then when you were talking about him falling asleep and you didn't think he was going to wake up, isn't that like sort of right out of Yellow Jackets? So, you know,
True.
she
Yeah.
falls asleep outside. And actually, especially me living in Canada, it is very dangerous to sleep outside. In fact, we have had people die. So I was actually pretty surprised that Irving didn't die. Well, I mean, you know, he's a major character. But so far, sorry, Pete, one more thing. I don't know if anybody watched Stranger Things. There was, I think it was season 2. They did like an episode that was like a side quest that 11 went on. So this sort of felt like a bit like a side quest. It didn't feel like part of the main story to me. So maybe that's why it was a little bit jarring. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, but as far as the overall season, you said that you're digging it, pretty much all of it.
Yeah, like last night after I was shut off the show, I said, oh my God, there's nothing else on TV like this. This is its own thing. I mean, it's not based on a book. It's not based on another property. This has come out of the showrunner's brain, which must be kind of crazy. And then you got Ben Stiller and some other incredibly talented people steering the ship on this. So I think it's going to be one of those shows that we'll probably look back and talk about as like, why can't they make more shows like this?
Yeah, I see someone in the comments had said that I might like this on the second viewing. I did enjoy it a lot better when I went back to break it down. I mean, I watched it several times at this point, and it all worked a lot better whenever I knew what the outcome was going to be. I still there's still some details that are troubling, I think, but we'll be able to get into those as we move through some of the things that we came here to talk about. Big thing, I guess, which is what we've been starting every episode with every discussion with Aaron. You and I started this back in the first episode about this idea of Helly and Helena. We can finally put those theories to bed. I was wondering, and I haven't seen a lot because I didn't have that much time in between when I got my other video out and when I started preparing for this, but I was wondering because they've been going back and forth on this on the subreddit like pretty seriously for a few weeks now. I'm wondering what the fallout there is going to be like.
Yeah, I do. We said this on the podcast. I do sometimes when you have the community that's very divided on interpretations of pet theories, when one side gets proven wrong, there's a little bit of like, I'm not sure I like that. That goes on in the community. So it's like that could be some of it. And but I don't know, because like I have a hard time commenting this topic because I thought it was very obvious that they're all like telling like with their hands face up that this was what's happening. And but it's like that, you remember like 5-6 years ago that gold dress, blue dress, and it's like we were both I mean, it's not the same situation, but like when I saw the blue version first, and I just could not I thought people were punking me. So it's like that's what it felt like. It's just like everything that I saw that was cemented the fact that this is Helena. Helly, what I call the Helly truthers were used that as evidence for why it's Helly. And honestly, when she verbatim gave the rationale for the Helly truthers, where she's like, I'm just so ashamed of who I was on the outside. I'm like, son of a bitch. They were right and I was wrong. They've really pulled the rug out from underneath me. But
yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I've been saying that week after week is like I don't think anyone could really still hold on to the idea that this is Helly, and they were, and there's nothing wrong with that because that was the intention. You know what I mean? Like the main thing for me had always been that I just watched the first season very closely to make a recap. And that's the biggest thing I came away from was like, how would you ever send that any back down there? Like, there's just no reason for them as an organization, as a family, or any other thing. Like her as an individual, like, there was no motivation for me as far as I could tell. So everything they did this season was just a good way of like making it seem possible that could be happening. Right. And, it's like, I guess the question then is, was it handled well? I would say yes. I mean, I like the way that they played with that. I think that it had the right duration. It didn't drag on too long. So what do you guys think now that it's over? I guess you could go first, Heidi, if you want.
Sure. Well, I don't know if it was from you, Pete, that I suspected it was Helena, or if it was, some other person who was covering it. But I was pretty much convinced it was Helena, probably from that scene in the hallway with her and Marcus, where she's trying to, it kind of felt like Groundhog Day. We were talking about Groundhog Day earlier, where there's this scene where Bill Murray's character is trying to recreate this romantic feeling with him and Andie MacDowell, and it feels very forced and everything. So there's this one scene where they're in the hallway and she's trying to, I guess now that we know that it is Helena, trying to be like Helly are with Mark, and it's just something a little bit off there though, right? It just doesn't feel like warm like it would normally be between the two of them. So it kind of felt like she was simulating that sort of, having watched, I'm assuming she's poured over several videos, and obviously we know it's kind of like she's pining for Helly's life in a way and wants to experience her life. So that's what I took from that. And so after that, I was pretty much convinced it wasn't her. And obviously Irving had her number, and she knew he had her number. So I don't know what was going on in her head. I'd love to know what was going on in her head though. We don't have that.
What do you think, Aaron?
I mean, I think you're co-sign everything you said about the length of time. I think that's I feel like that's one of the keys to their making a puzzle box, that they have figured out some essential truth that if you want to outsmart a couple million people with brains on the internet, you got to be a moving target. You got to give him something real juicy to fight about, and then after 3 or 4 episodes, resolve it, and then hit him with another juicy thing. And it's all misdirection to distract you from whatever they're kind of trying to do for the big reveal. And I think they're really masterful at that. And they're still also, that's why I think there were so many Helly truthers and so many Helena truthers, is there was a lot of ambiguous stuff, a lot of things that was up to interpretation, up to noticing patterns and noticing facial expressions and noticing the body language in which they walk. And it's just such a careful show that stuff all kind of paid off. I do wonder what is the fallout going to be with this, because
people were pretty
if you're Mark, how can you ever trust anything? Like, he's like the ultimate skeptic, brain in a jar at this point. Like, how can I know any of you people are real or who you say you are?
It's hard. It's very hard to imagine how any of this moves forward after this. Like, it's pretty, like it, the emotional high point is what happens to Irv. But like you said, the fallout is going to be crazy. Going back to work on Monday, like this is a weekend retreat, like essentially when they're going to go to sleep, the next time they wake up, they're going to be, having to deal with what they just witnessed or whatever. One thing I want to ask before we go past this though, is when was the moment, Aaron, when was the moment you knew for sure that it was Helena? Not like the first indication that really sold you on that point of view, but like where you knew for sure.
Man, because I know I said this in the first podcast, but now there's been so many signs in a row. I know I zinged really hard when she was the one that pointed out, oh, look, there's no cameras anymore. I know I zinged pretty hard when she seemed very distressed that the group was going to break up and like, oh, Dylan and Irv are going to go their way. And Mark, I thought that the body language between, so it's like, it's one of those things where like, I felt like I cottoned on pretty quick, like not from the moment she came out of the elevator, but pretty,
but when did
I remember that when she told her bullshit Night Gardener story, the second she leaned forward and said, it was just a boring ass apartment, and I'm like, oh no, yeah, and I just never got off of it. So
yeah, that I would agree that that was the first detail that really pushed me in that direction. But let me re-ask the question: when did you know for sure it was Helena?
Well, that's the thing. Is like that tent conversation where she said, I was so ashamed of who I was on the outside. I'm like, oh my God, I misinterpreted all these signs.
Yeah.
The Helly truthers are right. I'm going to have to eat crow with 5 pounds of salt. And
Heidi, when did you know that it was
I think it was
Helena?
when she brought the snow seal to Irving. And I think a lot of people have talked about that. And her face completely changed. Like when she realized he knows.
There's a great double look there. I agree
oh my God. It was amazing. I said, I wonder if she practiced that in the mirror. I've never seen anyone do that before. It was almost like a mask had been removed.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
The feelings I think there are actually kind of complex with Helena. I don't find her like Helena isn't your stereotypical bad guy. In fact, I even think that maybe she's been brainwashed. Like, I don't know what you're equating this to, if it's like Scientology or what have you, but I feel like she's sort of a bit of a pawn and has been brainwashed. So I think she's sort of yearning for this other any self life.
Yeah. When I knew for sure was whenever she said, God damn it, Seth, do it.
Oh,
like
yeah.
I didn't know 100% for sure until she actually said that.
If you want to say 100%, then that's when she said Seth, that was when it's like, oh my God, Irv is dead on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
it's also funny. You guys mentioned the performance that Helly gave, and I think you're also right, but also John Turturro I thought was amazing too.
The way he says Seth is just classic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and even like in the beginning of the episode when he first is stumbling in and he runs into Helly, he's like genuinely pleased to see it's Helly, but then there's like a beat and he's like, wait, you're not Helly though. And
she touches him or something,
Helly.
right? Doesn't she touch him? And he doesn't like that?
Yeah. And then he doesn't like the fact. And at first I thought it's like, well, this is just, like I said, Helly gave a pretty compelling, well, he's lonely and he's mad and he doesn't get to have his boyfriend and now you're mad. But I thought Turturro was just incredible at playing a very powerful, impactful character.
And I know there's been an idea out there that he might be reintegrated. And it's not something I've really subscribed to, but
yeah,
I saw people saying that they seeing evidence of that in this. Did you guys sense any of that?
I'm open to the idea that he's been severed twice, that he was part of some pilot program that didn't quite work out, and then because that's like there is something that's very old-timey about his devotion, like very much like Bert, but he's also missing pieces. Like it feels like a guy who's been around as long as Bert, but he doesn't have, like Bert remembers when they changed the scriptures. Bert remembers when we fraternized with other departments, and whereas Irv doesn't. And the fact that he's connected with someone on the outside that's doing some kind of anti-lumen thing, the possibility's there, but it's not my favorite theory for sure.
Yeah, I didn't get that at all. But I mean, I thought John Turturro was amazing in this. There's a couple of he does these amazing death stares. He did one to Helly when she was down at the world's smallest waterfall, I think they called it, largest waterfall. I live right near Niagara Falls. And then he did one with Milchek, so long, the two of them just staring at each other. But he was just brilliant.
It was an epic stare down with Seth for sure. I cut you off a little bit there before. Was that what you were coming back to? Was his tutorial?
No, I forgot what I was saying. So we can go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I think that that I didn't know 100%. I felt really confident in my point of view, but I think that it wasn't revealed until it was revealed. The way it was revealed was something that was set up. Her saying Seth and us knowing that from Miss Wong stopping Gretchen from saying Seth in the family, or saying who Seth was in the family session. Like, all of those are things that get me, keep me really confident in what they're doing with the show. So they're laying things that they're putting things out there. They're coming back to them. They're hitting them. So yeah, even if the beginning of this episode was a little jarring for me, like, everything else is still pointing towards, this is one of the best things that's on TV right now.
Actually, Peter, I was going to say something just because I did watch it a second time. One of the things I did notice is that it started on Irving, and then it started on Irving coming in, and then it ended on Irving going out. So I thought that was really kind of neat. It was sort of like his episode in a way.
Yeah, this is the opening shot, and then the closing shot is like this with his eyes closed. Sure. It's a cool detail. So yeah, let's talk about a little bit more about Helly before we go, because we're going to just get into Irv as a character here next. A couple of things. Glasgow block. Does that mean anything to anyone here?
No.
So when I was doing research for last season, there's a couple of things where you could freeze frame when they're going through the administrative functions, and there's things like clean slate and open house, and that was one of them. And if you Google for Glasgow, you get this reference to a coma scale. And it's a scale that doctors rate you from like 1 to 5 over 3 different axes, and the lower the score the more you're comatose. Like, I guess a score of 0 or whatever. I think the lowest score might be 3 is you're dead, and if you're 15, you're an active person walking around. So I thought it's like, okay, that's interesting, especially in terms of thought.
But it doesn't really. It's interesting, but it's not totally. It doesn't
apply to here. Yeah, like it was interesting in the context of Gemma and her being, in a coma before she died, and that being interesting. But like, the only thing I can think of is like, is this a variable depth block? That's like, you can have someone that's like completely puppeting it's like, is there like a slider between innie and outie, and it's implying because otherwise Glasgow, what is it? It's a town in Scotland.
City. Yeah. Yeah, that's your experience was exactly the same as mine when I looked it up. And it was kind of frustrating because everyone was so sure it was coma related because of Gemma, that every post you find about it, like someone swoops in and says, "Oh no, that's about comas." And the discussion ends right there. And like, now we see it's sort of like clean slate. Clean slate was like, everyone just assumed that means that they can reset the innies, and then clean slate came up earlier this season. It wasn't anything related to that. It was about the eyes or whatever. So I wonder if they're playing with that a little bit.
Oh, sorry, Pete. I was going to say, now that you mentioned clean slate and you wondered how, like, the fallout from this, I was wondering if they would do a mind wipe after this adventure, if they're able to do that, if they can do a clean slate. Like, one of the things we were talking about was, I mean, even though they haven't been outside before and they've never had an experience outside, they know the outside. Like, they know what a cliff is. They know what the ice is. They know what the sky is. They know even though it was a dead animal, they seem to know it was a seal. So, so they do have some information that obviously that they carry over from their outies. But I did wonder if they're able to go in and do a little bit of a mind wipe after this experience and do a reset.
I mean, the answer is yes, if they want to, because it's all made up, right? You know what I mean? Like, I guess my thinking about it is I'm worried. I don't want them to get too overly complicated with stuff like that. You know what I mean? So that, because if they start to be able to like just do whatever they want, then it's harder for us to track the story and enjoy it. Like then it does become a situation where they can just try to surprise us rather than lead us somewhere and then, give us the reveal or whatever. The one other thing, like I want to move right now into Irv, and because I think there's a natural transition here. But the one other thing, and you brought it up a little bit earlier, the thing that came up with for me with this was I'm really questioning what the upper levels of the family and the upper levels in general in this situation, like what their dedication to Kier is, because I don't know that maybe this is just a me thing. Like I just sort of assumed that this was something that they put on other people, like that, like, you know, follow Kier and all that. But like the actual people who were in power didn't really have to adhere to those things. I kind of got the sense that maybe that's the case. Like maybe there is a bit of that going on, like even at the highest level. So where do you guys add on that? Like the cult of Kier, like we don't really know. We know that that's a thing, but we don't really know how it functions, you know?
I think the way I've interpreted thus far is that belief in Kier and his philosophies are very sincere in the upper management and corporate structure of Lumen, but there might be schisms like you see in a lot of cults and sects where like you know, maybe like you have people who are overly faithful to one director of the board and then they die, and the new Eagan, like, I just not sure if she stacks up to Lenore or whatever. And I feel like that explains like why Harmony is sometimes seen as working at cross purposes. Like it seems like her Kier religion is older. It's cringier, it's needlepoint and, you know, craft macrame and things like, you know, things like that. Whereas there's something kind of like slick about the way that Helly talks about it, and Natalie and things like that, you know, with the Bluetooth earpiece and stuff like that. So I do think it's sincere, but it's just like, you know, it still leaves a wide room of interpretations.
Yeah, that's something I'm looking forward to finding out more about. Like, do they, you know, because how do you mention Scientology? You know, some of this stuff tracks in with the little that I know about, you know, with that, you know, and I wonder because, you know, like if like that, like Miss Huang, for example, right? Like Miss Huang is a child. That part is something that we know to be true, factual, right? But like, where did she come from? You know what I mean? Like, how do they have a child that works in the office and can go out and play her theremin out in the snow and prepare the luxury meats? And you know what I mean? Like, there's more to that story somewhere. I think that one of the answers to that could be that she grew up in what is essentially a church, or like that kind of sheltered, you know, culty kind of thing, but we just haven't really experienced that part of it directly yet, other than like knowing a little bit about Cobell.
Yeah, I think that like we were talking about this, that, you know, this is a fictional town, and the world itself is all fictional, or it's an alternative reality or what have you. So a lot of these people would have gone to a school that would have been, you know, a Eagan type school for girls or that type of thing. And they would have been indoctrinated into it quite at a young age. One of the things with Miss Huang, though, I think, is she feels kind of like an adult in a child's body. Like some of her skill set that she has, like sometimes it feels like she is not a child, like that she's actually, like, her personality is in conflict with her.
Confident at doing that job as Milchek was last season.
What's that?
I said she seems to be as competent at doing that job as Milchek was last season, and there's definitely
I like to see her tackle Dylan to the floor.
That part she probably
that would be awesome. Well, and she, I mean, she, you know, and I don't want to actually, because I have met teens who I have two teens myself. I've met teens who are very, very competent, and could you know, possibly see them doing that job, but I don't know how old she's supposed to be, maybe 14 or 16. But it does feel like she is an adult in a child's body, because you were saying she's playing the theremin. Yeah, she's playing that instrument, and that's like, I mean, it's possible that she has been trained on that since she was young, but she had quite a bit of skill with that.
One of our listeners had this really kind of off the wall theory that I quite liked, because there's a lot of people I even see in chat saying, "Oh, what if Miss Huang is, clone of Casey or a child of Miss Casey and Mark and all that kind of stuff?" And this person said, she identified as a crossing guard. Crossing guards deal with traffic. Miss Casey got in a car accident that landed her in a coma. Is it possible that Miss Huang got struck by a car and is presumably perhaps dead in the real world, and Lumen glommed onto her for those purposes?
It could be. Yeah.
There's no there's no there, but I thought it was interesting the commonality between Huang and Casey there, and how Lumen might use them. Because why else is a 14-year-old crossing guard in a school uniform on the severed floor?
Like I try to like, after years of watching these kinds of shows and being someone who has consumed a lot of theory crafting secondhand from other people, just sort of being a passive enjoyer of the batshit crazy stuff people come up with. I kind of try to always go to the most simple explanation when I can, just to keep myself grounded. And I have one for something that we'll talk about later too, and I'll see what you guys think about that. But that's just sort of my reaction to, like I said, of just being online and reading the craziest stuff all the time. Like, it just kind of keeps me whatever. But yeah, I mean, they certainly could. I think that Miss Huang is kind of a neat mystery right now, because she's, they lay the tracks for so many things, but like, it's kind of hard to see where they've done that with her, because she came out of nowhere at the beginning of the season, and we're still pretty early on, relatively, I think, let me see. I thought we're gonna get into Irv. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to throw out there about Helena, Helly, before we move on?
Well, there was a few people in the comments who were talking about this, that, Mark, because he doesn't have an understanding that that Helly is Helena, that technically speaking, that he didn't give consent because he thinks it's a different person. So that's something valid.
Yeah.
That and then we'll see the fallout from that. Obviously, it's going to be devastating.
Yeah, like I said, he's got, like, this is not the person he thought he was in love with, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, and if you think about the timeline of the way things played out, she kind of is at the same time, because like he fell for Helly, but like the actual everything in this season has been with a different person, you know what I mean? And then like Aaron mentioned, the betrayal that goes along with that, because as Irv pointed out with a very great line delivery, she was a mole. So everything they've done so far this season has been exposed directly, like going to look for Miss Casey, all of it. Like none of it is even valid anymore. Like like that's going to be a huge shock.
Yeah. It's funny because when I first was watching the episode and not, completely convinced that it was Helena, Irv was really angry about the fact that Mark was doing googly eyes at her and talking to her and having these little romantic moments, like knock it off. And I realized he wasn't mad that Mark was that line was cracked me up. It wasn't that it was that he'd have a problem with him being with Helly. He had a problem with him being with Helena because she's an imposter, and he knew she was an imposter. Yeah, but he wasn't quite sure who she was until the end there.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that took me a while. I didn't get that until I was well into writing the script for my video, that, he wasn't just being a dick because of, like, he was not liking the romantic thing. He was being a dick because it was someone pretending to be someone else that he was falling in love with, basically, which is crazy, because that's what I meant to get into earlier whenever I brought up the reintegration thing. I think that if you look at this pretty closely and go back and think about that through that lens, like where he's thinking about the fact that she's infiltrated their group, a lot of the stuff that he makes sense, and the way that it changes him, and he changes, like at the end, like people were saying, well, that's not very Irv, like the way that he came at her at the end. But like, I think it does make sense. I think you can track the change as, because of Bert is a big part of it. Losing Bert is a big part of it. And his like, and him not really having anything to lose at the end, but also like, yeah, they have a mole inside their group, and that is something that we get from him, like that's important to him. You know what I mean? Like that he's worried about, and he's trying to protect his friends in that sense.
Yeah. I was just shocked actually at how, like, I thought he might, when he was dragging her, like I knew she was in danger. Like when he stood close to her like that, I was like, no, she's in danger. But I was actually pretty shocked to the extremes that he went to, which I said, I think he has military training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was in the Navy.
Yeah, he was in the Navy. So
was he in the Navy, or was his dad in the Navy?
I believe that he was in the Navy as well.
Yeah, it feels like that seems like a maneuver a military person would do in a very extreme situation. Like it was basically like waterboarding, right?
Yeah, it was. Well, I mean, I don't know if that waterboarding, I think, is a slightly different, but I mean,
he's really trying to drown someone, not actually make them think they're drowning.
I was going to say really waterboarding. The point is to try to make them feel like they're drowning without actually doing it. Like he was actively trying. He
wasn't trying to kill her though, because he was trying to get Milchek to. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lifted up her head several. He knew when to lift her head up so she could get a breath.
It was well within his. He could have definitely killed her if he wanted to. Yeah, you're certainly right there. What I'm gonna get to this this super chat, but the one other thing is this slide I have here. They did spend the night together. They consummated the relationship as it was, I guess. Do you think there's a baby that could come out of that? Do you think that's what we're getting in this opening credits? There was quite a few babies, and then this one here with Kier's head
that looks like had Kier that have Eagan heads on them. I mean, you can't rule it out, right? Two adults,
I don't think you can.
With presumably functional bodies, just had sexual congress, so that's
and it would complicate things like TV shows like to do with it.
One thing they don't address in this show is we don't know like what's birth control. Do people use birth control?
Well, actually, in the Richmond letter, wasn't that something that Peggy alleged that there was like, or was this no? This was on a debate show that Natalie
that's
was
what I was just thinking
early
of.
In season 1. Is like apparently a woman got pregnant 6 weeks after starting.
Which they would. They totally would if this was a a real thing, right?
Yeah, like if they're like if you're just like sneaking off to
it'd be a bunch of horny teenagers down there
doing what feels good, and Lumen's telling you just don't fraternize. Nothing about safe sex.
Yeah.
It would make a lot of sense. But
it's like when you read space opera and you're like, these people have been on these ships for like years sometimes. Like of course they're going to be having sex. It'd be the same thing in every every severed floor. Like you take away the experiences, and with that goes the inhibitions, right? You know what I mean? Like
right.
of course you're being indoctrinated at the same time, but like there's going to be some freewheeling experimentation going on, I think, if this was a real thing that existed in the real world. But yeah, I'm not necessarily subscribing to that theory of the baby, but it's just something you always have to take into consideration whenever two people come together like that, and it would be really bad for either one of them if there was that kind of consequence involved. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Again, I don't know. I mean, I didn't even know, like, does she have any relationships on the outside? Has she been sexually active before? Was she, she could have been a virgin for all we know. She could have been very sheltered.
I actually wanted to see what your takes on that was, because that's what I thought. I thought this was telling us that she is actually quite sheltered. And I mean, Britt Lauer is in her late 30s, you know what I mean? Like this, I was looking at her as like almost just as a normal person that happens to be in a really powerful, weird family, like where that wouldn't be, that wouldn't be an issue. You know what I mean? Like she would have boyfriends, she would have suitors, whatever.
Right. Mm-hmm.
At the end of this episode, I wasn't sure about that anymore. And that's why I said this devotion to Kier, like maybe she can't do that, like maybe that's not permitted as far as like what they expect. And I don't know about the other CEOs either. Like there's been female CEOs. I don't know what the story about them being married or not is, or what Helly's mother, like who she was, or what we're supposed to know about that either. Like there's a lot of question marks, but you guys kind of came to the same conclusion that maybe she's that sheltered in the outside world.
Yeah, I get the feeling. Well, I mentioned this in my video that her dad at one point walks in the bathroom while she's in the bathroom. Now, it could have been a co-ed bathroom, but it's very intrusive. Like if my dad walked in on me while I was in the bathroom, I probably would have lost it. So, and then he stands very close to her too. So I feel like there isn't this idea that, and this is maybe where it feels like a cult or Scientology, or what have you, that there's this lack of personal space or privacy. Mm-hmm. And like I do wonder if Milchek knew that she slept with Mark. That's the other thing. Like, do they have, they're outdoors, but do they have surveillance? Or
I assume that they do. I just because that just seems like something that he would have to know, and it would be bad news. It would be bad news for everyone except for the rebellious daughter, future CEO, who wanted to make it happen, I guess.
Yeah, we were looking at it from an angle, and I think it's the fact that she seemed really drawn to the genuineness and naturalness of Mark and Helly's relationship, and that whether she might have had some physical experience before, she's never had that kind of real connection with a person that's not based on, some kind of shared identity or a routine you're supposed to do, a thing you're supposed to check off the list. And that appealed to her. That's the theory that I'm going. Because I feel like that Helly, she's got to start. I mean, at what point do you start getting, second feelings about what you're doing when you're this special mission your dad's got you sent on has almost wound up killing you 2 or 3 times. Like at what point does she say, I'm never doing, I don't care what Mark says or what Mark needs, I'm never going back into this thing again. Like, is it possible they can flip the outside?
It's kind of dangerous. It's kind of dangerous. It started out with getting her fingers cut off pretty quick. Like it escalated to that, like right up from the beginning. She hung herself.
And then is she getting out of growing up? Like she's getting fetid moppet from her old man. So it's not like, man, and you're absolutely what done for us lately.
You're absolutely right, Heidi. He is he just all about being in her personal space. Like there's no delineation at all. Like he just, like that was like the biggest thing from that scene. I think it's the beginning of episode 2. It's like, man, he just walked up into her face. Like she, like there was something creepy about that choice of like making that the thing that he did, I thought.
Also, he's quite a bit old, like for be her father. I don't know how old. I think the actor might have. I don't know if that actor looks that old or if they've made him look old, but
I think they make him look a bit older than he actually is.
Yeah, so he looks like, so maybe like if he is some type of cult leader, he's got like, I don't know how many children he has, but maybe Helena is one of the younger ones because, he, for someone in her 30s, her father should be really in like his 60s, and he looks like he's 80.
Yeah, he has some 80s pushing 90 kind of feelings as far as I'm concerned.
He's got grandfather vibes.
Yeah, and he doesn't help
drinking ether in your coffee every day. Those really ages you. Puts some miles on the tires.
All right, so let's we're gonna come back to Helly ultimately, because we're going to talk about Mark and some other things too. So let's go to Irv. Matt's Idea Shop. Thank you for the $1.99. He says, if Irv reintegrates, does he recall pre-reset memories? And this is not, this has been sitting here for a while and I've been thinking about it. I don't know that we can answer that for sure. Like, I guess, so what are your thoughts on this? You know, would he be able to, would he be like, if this is the last time that the Audi or the Innie is alive, this, if I'm interpreting this correctly, if he reintegrated, would he still have access to that? I would think yes. You know what I mean? Like that personality is still inside him.
Yeah, for sure. We saw it with
take,
Mark,
for example,
right?
the 5X people. Theirs was shut down. They were offline for a period of time. Bob Balaban says this at one point, right? When they play the ball game. Then all of a sudden he just wakes back up. That's all they're waiting for him. All that experience is still there. It's just dormant, correct?
I mean, it just depends on how the severance technology works. I think they somehow partition your brain and like they just shunt memories and experiences to one side or the other. If that's the case, I don't know why the chip would just shut off access to that region of brain, but it probably wouldn't overwrite it. But also, I don't know, you know, like what does the brain do if the chip's no longer telling it to put information there? Can it retrieve stuff randomly? Is it going to start overwriting stuff randomly? I mean, we're just have to speculate on that technology works. But I think that I think what I thought was interesting is it seemed there was something common to me between when Mark was forcibly put into the elevator by Milchik. And I'm pretty sure that Milchik was intending to fire Mark and move on with some other, and he was overrode. There was a completely different kind of unsevered sound. And that was and I wonder if there's like a firing protocol that is a little bit more permanent. But the thing that confuses me about that is like they did bring Mark back, even though he said it felt like that. I thought this was going to be in. It felt like I got fired, like almost like he could feel it different too. Yeah, I don't know what the difference is between someone just going up the elevator and someone being terminated. Other than presumably they're going to obliterate him from everything in Lumen. You know, they're going to delete his records and all that kind of stuff. But
yeah,
for a moment there,
did you guys get that too? That there was something a little different about the Irv and Mark unsevering.
I did think at some point that when he said he was fired, that he was actually going to die. I did have that little feeling. I don't think that he will, but I thought, oh, you know, like the fact that he's just like, it felt different than when he just put somebody in an elevator and so that's it. Like it felt like that he was going to be permanently gone.
Yeah, I thought of it. If you're talking about the Milchek putting him in the thing, I thought about whenever Grainer put Mark in the elevator in season 1 after Helly, after her incident. Like, that's what I thought more. I thought he's like, I don't know what to do with this, so I'm just going to throw him in the elevator and figure it out by the time he comes back tomorrow. But I don't know. I'm saying that with the presumption that he knows that Cold Harbor is important and that he can't fire Mark, because when he went to his house, you know, he never really, like when he went to Irvin and Dylan's homes, he was like, he went there and he fired them almost immediately. Like he had that as an option. It didn't seem like he had that option with him when he went to Mark's place or to Ricken's place to talk to Mark. So
they needed him to finish Coal Harbor.
Yeah, that seems
whatever
to be
that
like,
is.
Yeah. So we have another.
It's mysterious and important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm having trouble reading this for some reason. The color is weird on my monitor.
You want me to read it?
Yeah. Can you read this?
Sure. It says CT Cook, $5. Is Helena trying to give birth to her grandpappy Kier via Mark S?
Well, that could be a thing. I mean, there is a baby with Kier's head in the opening credits sequence.
I've been toying. I think you know this, Pete.
Yeah.
I've been toying this idea.
You had
the Kobelvig is some kind of reincarnation of Kier Egan's wife, the swab girl. And the way she talks about her husband that's passed and that he was going to build a quarters for her to hold her new boyfriend and the weird throuple, like kind of sexual things that they're hinting. I do wonder if that there is something special about Mark and he is being perceived as like this is the ultimate vessel for the Kier force or whatever, and that they're trying to kind of regenerate that swab girl Kier energy. Yeah,
like I said, I think it's possible. I try to not get attached to theories that are like that until there's more evidence, but you know, there's you're not a CT kook, you're not the first person that I heard say this, so you're not on your own. So thanks for the $5 on that one. This one maybe you know better than me, Aaron. Dread State, thanks for the 199. She says that there's a trailer scene where we see Helena and Mark meet at Pips. Maybe you lost. I haven't checked the trailer for a while. I don't remember this.
Not since because I've been kind of mentally checking off the scenes that stood out in my mind. And like them marching through the winter landscape and like Soviet border guard uniforms, that was a big one, and that this episode checked that off. The one that I'm really still looking out for is the Irv Mellon sculpture. I don't remember Helena and Mark being in a diner, but I also it wouldn't surprise me. It does seem like that's a possibility that Helena will get fed up and be able to be flipped on the inside, the way Mark's kind of being flipped on the outside.
I started working on a trailer breakdown and then decided to go back into, because I ended up having to be like, man, I forgot so much stuff, even though I watched this so closely. So I ended up deciding to go back and make a recap instead, because I was just rewatching everything over and over again. But the one I remember thinking that Helena might be in the alley world with Mark it wasn't at Pips. It was at like a restaurant, like a Chinese restaurant, maybe. Like there's an exterior shot of a Chinese restaurant that makes me think it's the same one. So there's a shot of Mark, he's somewhere, and there's someone in the background that could be Helena, like watching him, sort of like how Mr. Drummond was in Pips, but I don't think it's Pips. Right. I think maybe that's what she's talking about, and we obviously haven't seen that yet.
Someone was asking about the tents for Milchek and Miss Wong. I just had this idea that they were at a motel or a hotel.
Well, so there is a white tent in the background where Milchek is running from in the morning. Isn't that the outhouse? Oh,
that's the outhouse. Yeah.
Yeah.
It took me a while. I actually just figured that out earlier.
It matches the garb that they're wearing. They're wearing the white. Yeah. But
yes,
I thought maybe that was. I thought that was maybe what Miss Wong and Milchek, like they had different white ones, but then I noticed it whenever I was looking earlier.
How do we know it's? How do we
know? He sort of makes an indication that way when he talks about the 4-ply.
Okay.
Paper.
Also, it's smaller. It's just it's not as deep. Like I noticed it on a second watch. I didn't notice on the first watch, but it's just smaller. Looked like something out of Midsommar.
And that might be evidence, that they were at a sort of campground or camping situation like that, because they didn't build that. They didn't build the outhouse. It looks like it was already there, and their tents, I think, are theirs, obviously, but.
By the way, the budget on this outdoor excursion, it must have been like, I'm trying to imagine the Milchek doing these budget breakdowns for the where was that spaces.
That's another one of the many questions that made me wonder if it was real or not, was because it's like, how did he put this together? But we can come back to that, because I do want to talk about Seth a little on his own. Mary Sue gave us $10. Thank you very much for that. She just says, "Rip any Irving. Mark, please call the board. I need Irving back." This is the thing, okay? This is what I've been trying to get to with Irv, and is this really the end for any Irv? What do you guys think?
No.
Is there any call on the board to get him back, or does this have to be final?
Well, now that you say there's a melon party with his face on it, I'm assuming then he is back. That was his face
Well,
carved into
unless
the
that's
watermelon, right?
because the
Well, you
last melon
remember-
party was for
You
Bert
might, yeah, I was going to
retirement.
say you might want to think about Bert's
Oh, okay.
melon party in that context.
Mhm.
But I mentioned this on our podcast. I'm pretty sure that's what threw me though, is because Milchek is breathing fire about you're going to be complete. There's not going to be any recognition. There's not going to be. So it's like either he's going to relent on that, or there's another. Like I said, this is like we're misinterpreting this, and this is a return ceremony.
I think
But,
you used the word biblical in your podcast about the way that he delivers that, and that was the word I was looking for whenever I was watching it, because it's a serious Seth Milchek moment, right?
Yeah,
he's delivering wrath.
I am salting your lands. I am taking your people. I am driving your children before you.
All your sons will be murdered.
He wanted him to walk into the forest, which sounded like something like a hitman would say, like, okay, stand up, walk into the forest.
Where's my Walking Dead fans at? Look at the flowers.
Yeah.
Look at the flowers.
Exactly. I remember that. I think we all watched
it seemed very strange
part. Yeah, so my thinking is that this has to be because we need to have stakes, right? Like if you start to bring everyone back all the time, if that can be a thing that happens, then this doesn't mean anything the next time we get to that part where one of them has to make a decision based on,
I guess okay. Existence. So here's is this a good way to look at it? Was Han Solo being frozen in carbonite and taking the Jabba the Hutt stakes? Because if so, I'm going to argue that Irv has been frozen in carbonite and is hanging on a crime lord's wall. Because we know that there's probably a mechanism to bring him. It's like no one took him out and shot him in the head. There's probably a mechanism to get him back, but it should be some kind of effort, heroic rescue mission along the lines of like the overtime protocol, where they have to figure something out, exploit a vulnerability of Lumen, and then get it. But also to what end? Like, you sneak him into the severed floor, or you just I don't know where, but it's like it just seems crazy, and we didn't finish what was going on with Bert.
Okay, so let's just say let's keep it really specific and narrow. Then could this version of Irv ever return to MDR and refine projects? Would that make sense?
I think they could do that in a way that wouldn't be stupid, but they could also, I mean, like I've said this a million times, like there's no bad or verboten storytelling techniques or beats. They're just ones that have a very high degree of difficulty of pulling off, and a lot of suspension of disbelief. And if the show can manage that, then it can work beautifely. But like,
there is an example right in front of us at this moment, right? Because earlier I said the reason why I didn't think Helly would come back was because there was no reason, and the show did just right now this episode manufacture a reason. She should actually maybe come back in the next episode, right?
Well, so if Helena agrees to come back to the murder dungeon, it's like there's I wonder how much of the top side.
I mean, we don't know. I don't know.
They'll give us on that because it's going to be interesting to see how the team recovers from this, because there's the horror of, oh my God, you were a spy the entire time and I slept with you. I was so convinced that you were another person. How can I ever be sure? How can I ever trust any of you people again? Because our outies are all clearly a bunch of a-holes. I think there's lots of reasons to be bad, but it's like there's just like it just feels like they blew up the season again, and I felt like they blew up the season last episode when they reintegrated Mark. So it's like, I don't know. It's exciting.
Heidi, could you help me out with this question that's on the
It's from Ashton Baker. It's $5. What if Goat is also an Irving? I think they mean. Is also an Irving?
Yes, climb into
That's
goat
a way
holes
that Irv
with
could come
me.
back.
Yes.
I saw
love
somewhere
goat
that
theories.
I saw somewhere that the board are the goats, or the goats are the board.
Huh.
I'm sympathetic to all goat theories.
Yeah,
Irving could be a goat. He's got a little bit of and you can hear a little bleating there, right? Yeah.
All right. let's see here. Okay, so we are losing. I think we are losing any Irv on the floor, at least for the foreseeable future. But I don't think that we'll be losing his outie. I think that that's the silver lining here, right? Because that we've seen his role expand somewhat. Like we're getting some hints about who he's involved with. That he's not doing what he's doing by himself.
There's too much there.
Following him.
Yeah. They got too many irons in the fire with the outie.
Yeah, so
agreed.
So that's the good news, is that even if we don't see him back at work, we will see him play a role. John Turturro will endure. One of the things about that, though, and that didn't hit me when I made my video, but it came to me in the editing process, was he went to O&D. He found out about the exports hall because of that drawing. She knew where it was and seemed to be on the brink of telling him, but now he's not going to return. What does that mean for that?
Oh my God, you're right.
That whole thing was like, that's how they're going to find the testing floor. And now what?
Yeah, I thought about that too. But I mean, I think it's one of those, it's going to pay off later, maybe. Yeah. Pete, you're always talking about how they leave, breadcrumbs. They leave little Easter eggs along the way. So that's got to pay off later, maybe toward the season finale.
Yeah, I wonder about that. Like, I mean, that was the way that they were going to get there, and presumably he's not going to be there for that reason.
It wouldn't be satisfying if they just had an off-camera. If we have a flashback to an off-camera conversation with him and Dylan, where he's like, "I know, I found out about the elevator," or is that something that like Dylan might remember? Because clearly the other thing they're building up is some amount of guilt that Dylan's going to feel for putting what we know are selfish needs above what his friend needed. He was wanting to be a good boy so we can keep seeing his wife, or his outie's wife, and he rejected Irv's kind of bid for companionship. Can you go help me do this? Can I show you this thing? Not right now. So I wonder, but I don't think they can get away with that. I think that would have me kind of frowny if they revealed, oh, actually Dylan and Irv had a conversation about the elevator.
Yeah, that doesn't seem very Severance-y.
Someone did say, though, and this is true, that Irving did show him the picture,
but not the logo. There's no like he then found out that it's a real place with a location that Alicia knew about, and that's
we don't know if that I feel that everything that has happened up to this point is in a series, like is in what is it, in order, and so I feel like it hasn't happened yet. I feel like that'll be a reveal for sure. Probably maybe late in the season, if not in the season finale.
Yeah, I see people talking in the comments about the poster, and that was another thing I wanted to ask you guys. Like, whenever he said "hang in there," like the first time I watched it, that seemed so out of place, like so weird, and not like an Irv thing. And that's what I thought about, was this background that I have here that I made for this this "hang in there" poster. I thought about that, and I see people talking about that a little bit in the comments here.
Maybe he's left something behind the poster in the break room. You know how it's hanging on the wall?
Yeah, I think someone said that exactly in the
PD, PD with the picture frame.
Oh yeah.
There's precedent for that for sure.
So what did you guys make of the "hang in there"? Did that seem like a normal? I mean, those are his final words. He doesn't say anymore.
Thought
he stares down Seth, but they don't say anything.
I thought I took it a lot more symbolic, that this was, he's trying to, reassure Dylan that everything's okay, and these innies don't have any good experience giving heroic speeches or whatever. They've never read A Tale of Two Cities and all that kind of stuff. But he did see his best friend on a motivational poster with a quote, And it's kind of like the same way the Terminator gave the thumbs up, because that was special to John as he's going down. That was kind of like his Terminator touch. Like, hey, Dylan, hang in there. That's your
like that's how I'm gonna.
I got out
that's
of
how
it.
I'm gonna remember you, the heroic Dylan or whatever.
Right,
Mhm.
right. It was a way to for him to give some dap to Dylan.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and that poster, of course, is like, taken from that 1980s poster with the kitten. I think that's where it's taken from, right?
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah, I didn't think anything of it at first either. I was just like, hey, kid, hang in there. That's sort of like it'll be fine. It'll be fine. That's what I sort of took as it. But of course, it has a double entendre.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just on the edge of my seat the whole time. Like I was just like, and then it was just, I don't know why. There was just something that it just seemed discordant. The way that he said that. Like I don't know. I like your description of it though, Aaron. That's not something that that came to me right away, but it does make a lot of sense. But yeah, I think this conversation with Felicia is something that's definitely got to come back up. I'm just having a hard time figuring out how they get that with him not down there anymore. I mean, I guess there was a little bit of a rivalry between Felicia and Dylan in season 1, but he could definitely do it. He could definitely go talk to her himself for to honor Irv or whatever.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like maybe, hey, I don't trust you fucks, but
yeah,
you might want to know that Irv got retired. And then she's like, oh, and I could see him doing that as a favor.
Man, that showdown in the hall, that's really one of those scenes in the first season where I was already liking the show a whole lot, but like whenever that played out, and then when I kept thinking about that after the fact, like that's one of the ones that cemented it in my mind as like, this is I'm gonna watch every episode of this show no matter what until they stop making them. Matt's Idea Shop has a $9.99 super chat here. Thanks for that. Kier's biotech obsession began with the chicken skin hand he made, proving bodies could be rebuilt. Goats regrow flesh, freezing stores them. The chip restores memory. Eagan's path to immortality. So a thing about me when it comes to these kinds of things is like, I don't know what it is, but like once we start getting into like the specifics of how they might live forever or something along those lines, I check out mentally. Like I like this sounds well composed, and that there could be some valid reasons, but like I don't know, that I guess it's just from reading a lot of sci-fi for so long that like this, if this is what's going to happen, if the Eagans are going to be have a real plan in place to become immortal, then like we'll get to that. But like trying to figure out ahead of time, like it just kind of like, I don't know.
The what and how is
that stuff is never that interesting to me. Yeah,
right.
That's never that interesting to me. Like I understand why they would want to live forever and that they own this corporation that could be a vehicle to make that happen, but the details, like I just can't really make myself obsess over them. What do you guys think?
Do you guys know what a corporation is considered a person in America, and they're also immortal, and the Lumen is a corporation? Wake up, sheeple.
Yeah, corporations are people.
Yeah. Does this chicken skin hand, is that something that I don't remember? Does that ring a bell with you?
That's got to be like a Kier Chronicles.
I don't remember that
or something, right? I don't remember the chicken skin hand unless we're just commenting on the man's aged hands.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Matt's Idea Shop. I can't remember, but like I said, all of this sounds like you got a path in your mind to how this is going to make sense.
Yeah, and I got a version of that too. Like I believe versions of that as well, but like the theories that don't make predictions I find they're hard to talk about,
Yeah.
It's like I could watch Star Trek and come in and be like, you know what? I think that they don't have bathrooms. We've never seen them. They just beam the poop out to space.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is why it's a bit. This is why it feels a bit like Westworld. Like someone was saying that, and I think I mentioned this earlier, because we don't, outside of the park, we don't we don't have any understanding in the first season of Westworld. So it's sort of like this. We don't really have much of an understanding. Like we saw Cobell drive to Salt City or something, but we haven't really seen anything outside of this. What's it called?
Salt's Neck.
Salt's Neck. We haven't really seen anything outside of this community or the severed floor. And then if we're to take that they did actually travel to this location in the last episode, or unless it was a simulation.
Yeah. Did you guys have anything else about Irv that you wanted to get out there? I have a couple of small details I want to throw out there before we move on, but if you have anything.
No, I think I'm good.
No, I'm good too.
All right. So the file name he was working on was Montauk. Did that ring any bells for anyone?
What's in New York? Is it an area in New York?
It's another
coastal
name,
city.
Yeah, another name connected to water.
Mm-hmm.
I know, and it was shot in New York State, that episode.
Yeah, so nothing really. It's just I found that a lot of these names that they are. I looked up a lot of them in the first season, and I didn't find a unified, obvious smoking gun of like why they picked them in particular. It seemed like they're just sort of like a database of names, like where you need to populate a bunch of things. Like you see this in video games sometimes or whatever, where they'll just everything will have a name of a city. That's what it kind of reminds me of. But we'll see. They could all be
Is
connected.
Is it not true? Because I thought that it's been proven that they are all connected to. They're either a river, a reservoir, a dam, a bridge, or a body of water.
I heard you say that on the podcast, and I don't know.
Like even ones you wouldn't think of, like Lexington. There is a Lexington reservoir out in California.
Yeah, the one thing I know for sure is that they are all city names. Like I've read Dan Erickson say that in interviews that the way they decided on the file names was to use city names. Now they may have gone that extra step and connected them to water, or that could just be a lot of those names, like in America, especially a lot of the names in the pioneer days, people were just moving across the country and they would just call something the same thing again. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Or even across the ocean, you know what I mean? Like this isn't York. This is New York. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of there's a lot of things that are named the same thing in that time period, but
yeah, absolutely. Same in Canada. A lot of our cities are named after European cities.
So I don't know.
People
like,
are just they're seeing the water drop logo at Lumen, and they're again some of these Kier Chronicle articles you see that floated around. I guess Comic-Con last year. They're going crazy with the water stuff.
Yeah, the water, like that's another one of those things that like my mind just sort of shuts down whenever like I remember people used to bring it up a lot during the first season about how they were sitting there at the table drinking water.
Sure.
And I was thinking, well, if you don't have food, then you drink water, right? Like, why is that such a, you know what I mean? Like I realized that it could be a clue, you know what I mean? Like that it's very conspicuous, but it's also, it's a set that they're dressing also, you know what I mean? So like, maybe they just didn't want a bunch of open space there. Like both things could be true from my perspective, you know? Like
I was going to say that Lumen is actually a division of IBM. I discovered that when I was doing my video. There's a lot of inspiration from IBM. So I thought that was really, and also their principles are also sort of taken from IBM. So I think I'm sure they've looked at multiple. I was just reading like that the showrunners had multiple inspirations from different old movies, they did take inspiration from different things. So I think a lot of writers probably have a toolkit of what they like to use. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, because I mean, that's the thing is like you have a huge group of people that all have interdependent jobs to make a television show happen. You know, like as much as a show could be, you know, like in control of different aspects or whatever, you know, you got a bunch of different people who actually make it happen. So there's not everyone is going to be 100% on the same page. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's cool whenever they get close to that. But like, you know, I think the showrunner has creative, you know, can write things off. It has to write things off, I should say. But like so many other people contribute that there's just a lot of different ways things like that can happen. One thing I guess I saw in the comments too, that I wanted that you can kind of maybe help. People are asking about the time period. As someone who pays a lot of attention to costumes, what could you tell us that you get from the way they dress? Because there's modern technology, but then there's also a bunch of cars that don't necessarily look to be from now. So what do you see when you look at their clothes on the outside and the inside?
Well, I know the showrunner did talk about how it's sort of like a 1960s sort of aesthetic, like mid-century. So I definitely noticed that. And one of the things, even though I do costumes on my review, is the furniture immediately, the decor, the art decor, across the board for sure, mid-century. And I even talked about how I was mentioning IBM earlier. There's a lot of like the board table, for instance. I found a picture from 1960s IBM that had that same table, and then the actual designer of that furniture, they've used many of his pieces, so they're obviously going for that aesthetic. And then in terms of the clothing, it would be what I would call contemporary. Like even though it's like an alternative reality, it looks like clothes, at least the clothes on the outside look like clothes that we would wear. Like there's nothing that I'm like, oh, that's kind of a weird looking thing.
Yeah, to my eye, that's what it looks like too.
Yeah, like, you know, Silo, you're like, oh, that's, you know, these clothes obviously are specific to that environment, whereas this, it just looks like normal clothes. What's different though is the severed floor, and there is a handbook on the type of clothes you can wear that was released. And also there's a store in the show that says, you know, we sell severed clothes. So it's not allowed to have labels or logos. It has to sort of fall again, sort of IBM colors like blues and navies. And we find that, except for like, Dylan wears like yellow, but mostly it's navy. And then, you know, the different departments have their different colors, like the teal blue or the blue. So, and then I mentioned to you earlier, Pete, about the palette on the outside. We've got red on the outside. Like Mark wears a red sweater a couple of times, and then his sister wears teal, and then on the inside he wears blue. But also, like, have you noticed his hair is always like really, really messy on the outside? It's always like disheveled. He looks sort of like he just got out of bed. Whereas when he goes into work, he's always very well put together. Yeah. But I did notice about Helena, that for sure she came from money when I saw her character, because even though she's what I call dressing down, like she's like, oh, I'm going to try and fit into an office. She's wearing like diamond stud earrings, for instance. And she's wearing like shoes that are like 400 or 500 pounds or something like that, you know. So it's obviously quality pieces that she's wearing. And then did you want me to just talk about this episode, Pete? I'm rambling on here.
Yeah, one of the things about her outfits that you were talking about, I heard somewhere or read somewhere that they hand make all of her sweaters that she wears are all like handmade somewhere.
Well, I can believe it. Actually, the costume designer who worked on this, at least season 1, worked with Ben Stiller in the past, like on Walter Mitty. So, you know, and then Adam Scott also worked on that. So there's a good chance, that all of those clothes, because like they were saying, they're supposed to be, the Lumen clothing is supposed to be special. Like it's supposed to be actually clothing that you can buy at a store. It kind of reminds me like if you go to Catholic school and you have to buy the certain types of uniforms, there's usually certain stores that sell those uniforms that you can go to, and they fall within the regulations of whatever it is that, like Irv, for instance, he's the only one who wears a sweater vest, but there's probably some kind of, allowance for that as long as it kind of matches the rest of the suit or something.
When Mark's walking down the street with Alexa in one of
Eagan.
the season 1 scenes, they say that they sell Lumen, or I think it was like Lumen approved clothes or Severance floor approved clothes or something like that. It was just funny.
Yeah. And then there was a handbook that was released saying, like, talking about the colors, but that's where I sort of lobbed on this IBM thing, because IBM had the same thing. Like, so for instance, at IBM, even if you would go into work and you would wear your suit into work, you probably would take off your jacket and put on a lab coat. And then when you would leave work again, you would put on your suit jacket and leave. So they did that same thing. They would wear like, kind of how they do in the data refinement. They'll wear lab coats, or they might wear sleeve protectors or things like that. So it definitely reminded me of IBM on that again.
And I do want you to get into this one, what they're wearing here. What did you describe it as, Aaron?
It's like Soviet border guard special forces. Elite Soviet border guards.
Yeah, but what you said about the red and the blue, Mark, he has the red and blue fish that are kept separate in his apartment. But another one of the red and blue things that I really liked from the first season was that the reintegrated PD, he had a red and blue
yes. Yeah. And I remember you mentioning that. I did notice that too. So he's both severed and not severed.
Yeah.
Like he's
inside and outside.
He's inside out. So the red on the outside and then the blue on the inside. And then it's also tied into the tempers as well. I found like the 4 tempers also could be aligned with the 4 colors that we see in the show, the red and the blue and the green and yellow. So it could, if you want to really go tinfoil hat on that. But did you want to talk about this episode?
What are they wearing here?
Do you think these episodes, like all black outfits, is a way to dodge that dichotomy? Because like if we don't want to get right into Mark's reintegration, so let's take him to a very black and white environment with all black costumes, so there's no red or blue.
That's a good question.
Yeah, Pete and I were talking about before the stream. So one of the things, again, sorry if I'm mentioning Westworld again. So in Westworld, you have the black hats and you have the white hats. And so did you, and I also was mentioning that I kind of feel like Milchek was the one who sort of designed everything. Like this is his little, kind of like if he was in Westworld, he would be creating this one little world and he would design the costumes and everything. So I sort of felt like that. So what I found was interesting, absolutely agree about the Russian, like those are definitely Russian hats. They're wearing these great coats with these giant collars. And then Milchek and Miss Wong are wearing like creamy, I call it winter white. Like Milchek is super sharply dressed. Like he's probably the best dressed in the show. He's always like, look at him. He's always like, but he has a bit of a 1980s aesthetic happening there. But I thought it was interesting that he decided that they would be in the cream and then all of the 4 of them would be in the black. So I thought that was interesting. And then the second thing is that if you look under Mark's coat, he's actually wearing braces or suspenders with buttons, which is very old fashioned, and high-waisted pants. So I thought it looked kind of like turn of the century. And then someone was mentioning they're wearing onesies, which are actually like a union suit, or we call it long underwear. Yeah, we call it long underwear in Canada, but those were union suits. So it's very like old Soviet, like you were saying, Aaron, totally agree with that. So I'm not sure what the deal with it is, except that I'm just imagining this is Milchek going, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? Like maybe he's watched a movie and he took some inspiration from that. And he's just created this little world, and then the tents and like all the design that he's come up with the torches. Like he probably, those torches, you could tell he put a lot of thought and effort into them. Like they're a source of warmth, but they're also, for protection. So yeah, I just feel like this is all Milchek's brainchild.
Yeah. Okay. So that's actually the next point, right? And I just wanted to highlight Guy Incognito's thing here, because I thought the same thing when I'm watching that. I would like to see him going and making the requisition for the $3,000 snowsuit. Like it's really important. You know what I mean? It's not. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going for something here. But yeah, okay. So whenever I was having trouble deciding whether this was really happening in the real world when I watched it the first time, these are some of the things you just mentioned, or some of the things that were coming to mind. I've seen a lot of people say this since. I didn't notice it, or wasn't one of the things. I mean, the TV was out of place, certainly, but I've seen a lot of people saying that there's no cords and obviously no way to set that, like to plug that in somewhere on top of this hill, which is kind of a thing. So with all of this stuff, that's what we're supposed to believe, right? That he just did this. Like that's Milchek doing Milchek's thing. Like he planned this, he set it up. At one point, he even went and hunted a seal, or he picked up a seal carcass somewhere that had been starting to decay and put it in their path. Because I mean, I saw the interview with the actor Tramell Tillman, and he said that in his mind, anyways, that this is all stuff that Seth thought up and provided for this excursion.
So I want to say that, like, that's when I was watching this, I kind of thought that this is some kind of Eagan National Preserve, that the grotto is probably real. The fact that I just cannot believe that Seth tunneled a plinth and like a lighting system for the 4th volume. Like I don't know. Like some of this stuff had to be there. And I was, even after, we were kind of texting back and forth this morning, or I guess last evening for you, Pete, about the seal. And I'm like, well, like seals aren't in the forests of North America, so I imagine they had to truck it in there. But then I'm started thinking, it's like, well,
how would that work?
If it's an Eagan National Preserve, maybe they just have seals running around in there,
The actor did say he left it for them. The Milchek actor. So I don't know.
He did say he actually dropped
it.
Yeah,
he did. He definitely said that was. Yeah.
They what the hell, man?
They mentioned that in the official podcast too.
Why? They've never seen anything dead, right?
Yeah. They're trying to scare them is the justification, making them afraid of the outside world.
A butchered cow wouldn't, like, there's so many other carcasses you could get, so it's easier.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was so weird. Like
why would they think? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Pete. I'm warming up here.
Yeah, me too. Sorry. Like I went down a rabbit hole about seals because I was really confused about this, and like I was able to find that it could be possible that if they're close enough to the ocean, that a wounded seal might go into the woods, basically where they were to die or something like that. Like they wouldn't hang out there normally, but that that's not impossible.
Up that cliff.
I think that body of water, it looks like it's connected to the ocean. It does look like it's connected to the ocean.
But but the whole thing was just like, it shouldn't be like that. So they should be putting it there. But then whenever I would try to think about how they would actually do that, because a lot of places you're not allowed to take seals. You're not allowed to hunt them. You know what I mean? Like they're, you're like, it's not like, that's like a regular pastime, like where you just like hunting deer in the United States or something like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I couldn't find anything compelling to say.
And I was also thinking just now, it's like, okay, that strikes us as a very exotic animal.
Yeah.
But for innies, like a cow, a pig, a sheep, a goat, like
they're all equally.
You could have said you saw one of the rarest animals in North America, a pig. And like they're just passing off
like that's all
nice.
Like,
I mean, that's a nice. Like I said on the podcast, like that's a waterfall I'd be happy to hike a couple hours to see.
Yeah,
but it is not the tallest. It's like well, yeah, why go the extra mile to do a truly mind-blowing animal when any would have done the trick?
They might have had a seal on ice, or they might have had a seal like that died, like that they had and they used it. I don't know. Like again,
it's just a choice that they made them to do that.
To do a seal. Yeah. It seems to me like, as someone from Canada, we have seals, that wouldn't be the most ridiculous thing that could wash up on the shore or dead, because that happens. They die all the time, or whales or what have you, but that would be really large. But I don't know. I could barely even tell what it was. Like, I don't know. Were you guys looking at it going, I can't figure this out. It just looked like nothing.
Until I saw the fin, I thought it looked like, you remember that Annihilation movie with Natalie Portman?
Yes.
Like that bear, like it's like this weird, disgusting, moist flesh. I couldn't quite tell what it was. It's so putrefied.
That's what I thought at first.
It's been a while since I saw that, but it sounds creepy.
Yeah,
it's
would have gotten very bad food poisoning if you'd eaten that.
I do love Irv. Let's eat it.
Yeah, I love that too. That was fantastic.
That was very Yellow Jackets of him to say.
We don't know where we are. We don't know anything. So that was, like I said, that was one of the things. Like, I was just, even after the fact, like a lot of this stuff, if you start pulling on it, you wonder how they made this happen the way that it did. I'm okay with it. I mean, they have resources, I guess. You know what I mean? The other thing about this, though, is these twins. This is something we definitely have to discuss. I know when I talked to you the other day, Aaron, you guys must have just recorded your podcast because you said that Jim had brought up animatronics. Someone else I talked to about TV had already said that to me, that had seen the episode. So, like, I was resistant to this, but I mean, as soon as that idea is out there, like, they look like animatronics, don't they?
I do. As soon as because I didn't, when Jim said that, I'm like, oh my God, that's actually really, where'd you come up with this? No, it's actually really smart that like, it's something, because I'm like, wow, this is weird. They must have like gotten like people to look like that or something. But he said, no, they introduced the concept of having these animatronics.
They laid the tracks.
So like, yeah, Lumen has this technology. I did think it's very funny that Mark is the one that's standing the weirdest.
I think Helly looks weird. Like, she looks like her head is.
Oh, but like,
and then especially when she's standing pointing, she looks like she looks like something out of a horror movie to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I was thinking, like, because I guess what I don't want is, I don't want this to be like real replacements for human beings. You know what I mean? Like,
I want to see their bellies. I want to see their bellies. Do they have belly buttons? Do they have pouches? Oh my God. Are these the MDRs we have to worry about?
Right. So, two things. One, I know that I said this in my video, that I realized that the one who was credited as Mark Shadow is also the same guy who was credited as being the man in the hallway in the first episode, whenever he sees someone lurking behind him.
That's really interesting.
It is. And is he also wearing the same outfit?
I mean, you would think so, since that's something that I saw people say at the time, was like, it looks like Mark.
Like, it's a blue suit.
Yeah, because of the way he was dressed. But people were thinking at first maybe it was Mr. Drummond, because no one had seen him yet, and the replacement. But like I said, he was credited, so we knew it wasn't that. But it, that was just a weird thing, right? So in that case, so I guess after the fact, like, what I thought about was, okay, if these are animatronics, what does that mean? And like you said, they laid the tracks for this by saying that in 5X they had animated perpetuity wings. So then I was thinking,
it's been shut down. So we know they got these animatronics floating around.
That's what I was going to say. So maybe they had these are left over and they're repurposed, or maybe this is, if Cold Harbor is so important and this is going to be historic or whatever, like this is going to be some big thing that's going to be important for Lumen as a corporation. Perhaps they have these animatronics because they'll be a part of the perpetuity wing in the future. Like, maybe this isn't like some long-term goal, like as far as like Lumen Tech or whatever, that they're going to make people to put severed chips in, and they're going to be their workers that aren't even human anymore. Maybe this is just like they have these things sitting around because they expect to, make them display items. it makes it a little bit, makes the connection between this one and you know, the one we saw in episode 1 not really make sense. But what theories do you guys have about these why these are creepy animatronics that they're using out there on this?
Does it so where are we at with Dieter Eagan being real? Or like, cause like me and Jim kind of talked each other into the idea that this was a metaphor Kier was using for his dark half, that he was that he killed out in the woods to become a man.
That's the way I interpreted it originally, that he never had
I think the fact that if these are revealed to be animatronics at some point in the future, if that's like, if somehow that's verified, I think that just reinforces the, you know, because Milchek says, I provided you with twins just as, you know, Kier did. Well, Kier, if Kier's twin wasn't real, then neither are these. So
yeah. So do you have, I mean, animatronics, what is it like? What does that make you? Yeah, because I mean, that's not a robot, right? That's a very specific thing. It's like a puppet.
It is, yes.
A mechanical puppet that can
or
do
Five
very
Nights at
limited
Freddy's,
things.
you know.
It can do things like,
yeah,
know, like very slowly and creepily point.
And they did seem, you know, there's that uncanny valley. Like I was like, at first I was like, well, it's definitely not the actors, but then there's also that uncanny valley. So then I'm thinking, are they projections or like, what are they? And so, but the fact that they're outside, not wearing coats and everything lends to the fact, if they're not projections, that they must be some type of robot, not a robot, but a animatronic.
So yeah, like I think it's interesting because I did find myself at the end, like you just brought up, Aaron, saying, what was the point of the story of the twins? You know what I mean? What was that? I mean, obviously there's a message, there's the allegory there, like, you know, you need to control yourself. You need to be able to tame the tempers, as it were. But like, is there a bigger thing that I'm missing here, or was that just funny? You know?
My speculation is that Lumen would like to dispense with the other innies and just have Mark work with a new team or on his own. So the whole point of this team building organization was to destroy the team. Like they've already got Dylan split off because they've got this unique carrot that he can't tell anybody about. So he's already kind of like not serving the team with his whole heart. You know, they saw that Irv is kind of getting irritated. They probably don't understand why with the Helly and Mark situation. So, hey, we'll take him out on a romantic retreat, and that will fracture. I feel like that. They're just trying to create an environment where Mark doesn't need or want his fellow teammates anymore. Feels alienated for him. That's what I think they were trying to do, and all that other stuff was just to suggest. Although I do wonder what is up with all the weird sex stuff all the time. You know,
elaborate
parties, the wasting their seed upon the landscape, and it's, you know, like what's the deal?
That's one of the reasons why I had trouble thinking of Helly as being sort of sheltered, was because I was like, yeah, they're weird, but they also like realize that there's a purpose for sex. At least like they give them sexual waffle parties when they do well at work. You know what I mean? Like they're not completely prudish. Like when you saw that scene, the what is it? The 9 principals were on the Cat o' Nine Tails whip in the in the founder's bedroom, right?
Which is where they had the waffle party, which is, you know.
Yeah, where you put on a mask to look like the founder and then have sex with 4 strangers who are also wearing masks. So
crazy.
Like I was because like I said, I think the story is about Kier taming the tempers. I think that's the actual reason why there would be a 4th appendix, if that's, you know, the you know, or whatever, like that would be what it's about. You know, the next story was called the thieving nanny, right? So that would be some other temper you know, that he would have to manage or whatever. Like that's what that seemed like. But I was just trying to think like overall, like big picture, how does this fit in with like, you know, Mark and with, you know, this is Irv's episode. So was there a connection with what was happening with Irv? Or was it just funny to hear like, cause I mean, the thing about the story was it seemed really serious until you realized that it wasn't, you know, like until for me, it was the part where he said he spilled his lineage. And I was like, wait, that you can't interpret that any other way. Like they're talking about what they're talking about there. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like the writing in his book, or the, you know, whatever it's called, the Chronicles or what have you, the writing is so like verbose, and just it kind of comes across. It sounds almost like fan fiction, or I don't want to insult fan fiction because there's some good fan fiction, but it just, I don't know what you find about the writing.
The prose is very purple.
Was it you guys that were saying that you thought maybe? Did Jim say that he thought maybe Rickon had written it?
I think a listener did. I'm not crazy about that theory.
Mm-hmm. I'm not either, but I can see where that's coming from, though.
Yeah, but it does feel a piece of because I think it shares much more with what we know. Like anytime that like Irv dashes off a quote from Eagan, or it sounds very much like that pseudo religious kind of, you know, trying to ape the way the King James talks about stuff more than Rickon's very self-important artsy fartsy new agey stuff.
Yeah. I heard Jim say it on your podcast, and then I heard someone else bring up the idea that Rickon wrote it, and I think that probably is just because the same person, Dan Erickson, had a hand in writing both of them more than it being.
This is also true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know,
yeah,
because I know, I'm sure you guys did the same thing. Like I listened to the 1 hour of Rickon's book that they released this week. Did you see that, Aaron?
I've got it on downloaded to listen to. I was gonna like listen to it in lieu of an audio book, drifting off to sleep. See how that. Although I might wake up. I might wake up all kinds of messed up. Maybe I shouldn't give my subconscious over to Rickon.
Yeah, there's some stuff that seems like it could be important. Like he talks about Gemma quite a bit, and they use like fake names or whatever, but there's some stuff like that. It more than anything, like what I got from it was that it's kind of better in short bursts. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And because it's a lot whenever you listen to, like, Michael Chernus does the audiobook, so it's
oh great,
it's full immersion, you know what I mean? It's like Rickon is reading the book to you, so that's cool. But like you know, like that.
How was his sinuses? Did it sound like he had neti potted, or was he a little?
I think congested? He did. He sounds pretty on point. Yeah. There's a question here that I've been trying to get to. Science Bunnies, thank you for the $10. This is something I hadn't thought of, but what percentage chance is it that all of episode 4 was a reintegration vision of Mark's? I feel like it was a really abrupt jump from the end of episode 3. 5% chance of reintegration vision, at least in my humble opinion. The one thing that I would say against this would be that you can't kill a character in a situation like that. That would really cheapen that for me.
I wouldn't say you couldn't do it, but again, the degree of difficulty.
Yeah, you shouldn't.
The one crack in the window I can see sneaking out is that a lot of people have already analyzed the team in terms of the 4 tempers, and that this is an episode about taming a temper. And if you want to say metaphorically, the Irv was woe because he was the one who's kind of like worrying more, or he's a little bit more morose, and that I could see that's like I said, I could see it, but it's not something I would want them to make a habit of, and they would have to really write their asses off for me not to kind of throw my hands up at that.
Yeah, that's what I would tell Science Bunnies was that, man, if they did that, like,
It would
It'd
feel
be
like
really
cheating
hard.
to me. I think it would feel like cheating.
Yeah, it'd feel a little dishonest to me because I felt something from watching that. And then if you go back and tell me that it didn't really happen, it was just in a reintegration fever dream, then I'm not going to trust you so much next time.
Yeah, someone was saying also like Mark had that when he was with Helly, had that glitch of where he saw Gemma. It was like a glitch.
Oh.
I don't know what you call that.
Yeah, I guess that's really, I mean, that could be the next stop on this, I guess, is reintegration and the lack thereof in this episode. Like I said, I've been critical about certain things. That wasn't really the big issue for me. Like I do want to see how that happens. And last week in the live stream, we talked about that a lot because we kind of both realized that we don't really understand how that's going to even play out. And I think you and Jim were doing the same thing in your conversation this week, Aaron. Like,
yeah,
you think, hell yeah, we're ready to reintegrate, but what does that even actually mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
She held a really strong magnet up next to his head and tried to, get the two sine waves to sync together. But we don't know how many times she did that to Petey. We don't know how long it would take to make that so that it would be like something that he experiences in real time all the time. It could just start out as flashes like this, like exactly what we saw here.
True. Yeah, you can't rule it out.
So, that's something to think about. Good old Dieter.
I think Dieter is Kier's middle name. Kier, Dieter, Eagan.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
It's a German name too, I think. I don't know if they're German, if Egan's German.
Sounds very
I saw German, somebody posted a reply on something of mine. Michael, what was his name? Wayne and Garth.
Oh, Michael, he's from Canada. What am I thinking?
Yeah,
Mike
Canadian.
Myers.
Mike Myers, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. Didn't he have an SNL character that was like a weirdo named Dieter?
Yes.
Oh, and on Sprockets.
Yeah.
Yes.
The time on Sprockets and when we dance.
Yeah. So that's a funny thing to connect.
Well, it's just like, I don't know, because like the Eagans, like they seem kind of like with the Milchick, with the paintings, they seem sort of I would say that they're probably not very woke. They're maybe even, I could say they're racist.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
But they gave Milchick a version of Black Kier. How can they possibly be racist?
That was one of those things where I was like, what is this? What is it? Like, I mean, I guess that's where, the simplest explanation has to be right, because it's like, it's so absurd that it's hard to even imagine that they would be that tone deaf. But then again, there's so many examples in the real world that are like that.
I was sitting on the couch and watching, this with my wife, and when they handed in this thing, I'm like, watch it be a picture of Black Kier. And like 3 seconds later, I'm like, oh my God, it's a black, it's like I was like, there's no way they would do that, but they did that.
Yeah, they did it. That's probably how the writing process played out too. They were like, wouldn't that be insane? And they're like, okay, that's a challenge.
They're like, oh my God, that is insane. We have to do it. Yeah.
We need to try it. So yeah, reintegration. I think it's we're getting, it felt like this episode 3 was really abrupt, but we're probably getting a process. And so that might've been out of necessity that we got that early on. And I'm just wondering like how that's is going to kind of make the rest of the season work. Like, I don't know, like, initially I thought, okay, this thing that happened at the end of episode 3 would probably end up happening at the end of the season. So now I'm sort of wondering if reintegration, like pure reintegration, is going to be at the end. Like we see him struggle with just having the random memory from time to time through the next few episodes. And then finally in episode 10 at the end, he's two people and they're both inside there.
Yeah, it could be.
And you brought up the same thing that I said, like, and I think that, you know, we, by design, we're supposed to be thinking about, like, why didn't he let Ragabi finish that sentence? Right. She says, I can create a version of you where this one's in there, and then we don't know what she's,
one that loves you, and then another that I'll do it. I'm like, no, shut up. Let her finish.
Yeah, let's do that, because I guess we also are in a race because I look back at his screen whenever he was working. There's that scene at the end of episode 1 where Helly kind of missed the power button, you know, when they come back into the office. And it looks like, if you look, he's the Cold Harbor file, you know, like if you look at those images, like he's got quite a bit of progress going, right? Like here it says whatever, 60.
Yeah, he says 68%.
And so, you know, there's a race between that bar getting filled up and him being reintegrated at this point. Like, right. That sort of defines the rest of the season. We're supposed to imagine that whenever that gets to 100, then whatever Lumen needed him for may be complete, right?
Yeah, somehow this is the last, even though he's done many quarters and many projects, that this is the last one.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like, you know, we're talking about like, how do you go on from here? I remember just 4 or 5 weeks ago, me and Jim were like, how can they possibly go on from the season finale of last year? And they keep finding a way. So
yeah, that's sort of their job.
Like, I wonder, it's like, it's just like this Lumen needs him to do this thing, but like the fact that there's a version or a build number 25 here implies, like, how would they know it's the last time you would have to do it? Like, what if this one just doesn't quite macro data refine the way they wanted it? You know, like, will they have to do another one? Because like this, there's no way they can keep this file open another season. So something has to change. Like, they either gotta go back to the drawing board, or this thing kicks up to a whole new gear.
Yeah, I mean, Harmony said the last time we saw her that he's so close to finishing, and that she wanted to be there for that. Like, this is supposed to be a landmark. Like, finishing this progress bar right here is supposed to be a landmark achievement. Something they're all waiting for, and they're willing to do like whatever they fired
domination.
Yeah, they fired Irving and Dylan, and then instantly brought them back when they didn't think Mark would continue working on the file without them.
Well, my personal opinion is that at the end of the season, this will probably be finished. Like, I think this arc will have to finish. And then they would something else, and then it would be ever, you know, bigger stakes, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe we get to expand outside of this, like Westworld. We get to expand outside and see more from the perspective of the board, perhaps. Or although I think that they're aliens. I've sort of come to that conclusion.
I think about that, like, where is this going? Because, like, even if it's like a multinational corporation, and like, you know, it's like, is this like a Stranger Things where I'm going to believe that children can take on the devil? Like, this Mark, you know, in Westworld, you've at least got robots that are like combat capable and super strong, right? Mark's just a dude.
Yeah.
Like, Dylan is just a dude.
Kind
These
of
guys are not SEAL Team 6 or Mission
Yeah.
Impossible. Like, where does this go if it turns into aliens or multinational corporations, politics, assassination, mind control? Like, they're just dudes and ladies, you know?
Yeah,
I kind of like that about Mark. Like, he's sort of like the everyman. You know, he's, you know, I've talked about this on my channel, that there's always one character that we're sort of like seeing the world through, and I kind of feel like, well, I guess he's the main protagonist. So. But he is a very everyman. I mean, I think the actor Adam Scott's an attractive man, but they've really kind of downplayed that on the show, and they've kind of made him a little bit, like I said, he looks like he just got out of bed.
Yeah,
he's
angular,
like,
poorly
awkward. You know, he's not especially interesting or funny or Like there's nothing really about him that makes him sparkle or anything. Like there's just, I don't know.
You always pick up on that whenever he's with his sister, because he hits a different gear with her. You know, he hits that sibling gear 100%. Where he's like, he's way more dynamic and interesting whenever it's just those two, you know.
For sure.
Everywhere
I love
else.
Devin. I think she's amazing. I think she's a great, like I think she's a bit of a foil for Lumen.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what she'll think about whenever, you know, when she finds out about reintegration, because he seems to be keeping that from her. You know what I mean? So that'll be that.
I don't think it's aliens either. I just was sorry. I don't know. The whole thing with the board, I mean, it's mysterious, right? Because Natalie's got that earpiece and we don't know who she's talking to. Yeah. She could just be making it up for all we know, right?
I feel like the goat clone people are like, whoa, aliens, come on, let's keep it grounded.
Yeah.
They're satyrs or something.
Well, we're getting close to the 2 hour mark here. You guys, I don't know what your
I do have. I'm taking a foreign language course on the weekends. I got a German class tomorrow morning, so I can't stay on for much longer.
Yeah, I think we're getting to the end of our notes here. I just wanted to address it so that you didn't think that I was gonna keep going. I mean, the last couple of things that I wanted to touch on, we kind of went over it. Was, I mean, I do think that it's kind of hard to say what's going to happen next with the innies because of the way this episode ended. But the other thing that I think is important is this idea of sleep and their shared consciousness, that because this is the last time we're going to talk about Innie Irv potentially for a while, and sort of the way that he got this in his dream when he was asleep. Where do you think they're going with that in particular?
What about the
Well, I mean, one of the big parts of his story was that his Audi was trying to kind of sleep deprive him and pass this through sleep. And then whenever he has this dream here, he sees the name Eagan on the monitor. And that's when he knows for sure what's going on with Helly, and then he goes to confront her after the fact. So this is a big part. This part of that innies and outies sharing a subconscious, like that. That's a thing. You know what I mean?
Are you implying that on some level, Audi Irv knew that she was an Eagan?
He knew that she was an Eagan when he walked up to the waterfall. 100% is my interpretation.
Yeah, but I'm saying but that information didn't come from like spirit forces or ESP, right? Like if your theory is right, and also this is the first time any of these innies have experienced sleep, right? Like Irv is passed out.
Well, that's another thing about this episode that's so interesting, because at first, I was thinking, oh, that's really cool that Seth is giving them a chance to sleep for the first time. But then I realized that that's actually a liability, because they could enter a dream state and 100%. Something could happen. But yeah, I thought that
doesn't that imply though that Audi Irving on some level was
knew
aware
that she was an Eagan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I believe that's what they told us in that scene. Is there a different interpretation? Do you guys have a different interpretation?
Sorry, no, Pete. I was going to say that Irving has slept before in season 1. Remember, he would do all these all-nighters, and then he would fall asleep and have these crazy dreams. So,
but not a night sleep. You know what I mean?
Not a night sleep, though. No, yeah. So, do you feel that that's a combination of his Audi and Innie together?
Yeah, I think that whenever he gets the name Eagan, he figures out she's an Eagan. That comes from his Audi. I don't know where else it would come from.
Yeah, well, that's what I immediately thought. As soon as he woke up, like he was like, he was like, I gotta go, find her or find them, right? So he immediately that was sort of just the confirmation he had that she was, because
he sees Woe in Helly's station.
Yes.
And so there's a different version of this where supernaturally she passed that on to him. but that's a different thing. Like
yeah.
the more sensible explanation to me is that his outie knew this information. So when he fell asleep, he gained access to it. And then he woke up knowing she was an Eagan, and he called her out for it. And that's how the thing ended.
Mm-hmm.
I will say it is very funny that Irv made a life or death call on his colleague, and his source was literally, it was revealed to me in a dream, sort. It's like one level above crack pipe source statements. Like it's
Well, so the idea then would be that Irv on the outside knows, like, she's a public figure and would know what she looked like. Is that
right.
the idea?
Yeah,
and then
his
his outie in the dream, that was his way of telling him that that's an Eagan. Because then it seemed to all like go into place, because he knew she was an imposter. He knew she was a mole, but he didn't exactly know. But then he kind of figured it out when he was talking to her, saying someone would have to have access.
Yeah, because on the screen, you see the letters for Eagan. Like, it doesn't spell anything.
And look, I was making a face as well. Did you find that?
That's why I figured it must have to be like, that's a clue to that it's coming from his outie, is because it looks like it's an artist saying something. Yeah. I mean, it's not perfect, but that's, after I thought about it for a while, it's like, I don't really see what else, like, because like I said, the other thing you have to do is think that this temper, that she somehow passed him some information. And then what does that even mean?
That's what I'm saying. You have to go into like spirituality. You got to
supernatural. What I'm saying. I don't want to go there. I want to go. I feel like simple that makes sense.
I feel like his innie brought that part though, because I love what you're saying about his outie has that influence on the dream. But they showed the picture of Woe, and that she's like half the size, and it clocks like it looked just like that, right? So I don't know if you've had that. You've watched media or looked at something, and then that night you have a dream about it. I've had that. So that's what I was thinking with that. And then you were saying she's sitting at Helly's station, and they even put her face on it. Is that what you were telling me, Pete?
That's what they said. I mean, they said something about that in the official podcast, that there's some frames of Helly that are superimposed in there. I didn't notice them. I just heard him say that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like, I think that's something that there's an emphasis on this idea that dreams are shared space, I think, and something that might be interesting going forward. Man, there's a lot of fun stuff to think about, like Dylan, we kind of saw for the first time here that he sort of censored himself in front of the rest of the group when he realized, hey, I might get in trouble I might lose my, so I'm sure that's going to be a plot point, because I mean, he's the one that should be, devastated by losing Irv, right? Like that's the setup we've got. So he's going to be juggling this idea of losing his friend, but then also not wanting to lose his new friend of getting to go see his Gretchen and talk about the family and everything else. And I personally think that's probably heading somewhere. You know what I mean? I think there's a relationship budding there. So that, that'll be interesting. Mark obviously is going to be reintegrating, but then, I do think that they might have to be, I think Irv might have forced their hand, and they may have to send Helly R back. And it'll be really interesting to see how she, reacts to all this stuff.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. There's so many ways to go from here.
Yeah. So if you guys have something else you want to bring up, I guess now's the time. If anybody has some questions like they want to throw in there, Silver Scale, thank you for the $10. They say fun chat. Thanks everyone. Glad to hear it was fun. You guys have anything that you want to?
Well, actually, Pete, you had biblical in your notes.
Yeah.
On that?
Well, biblical was what Aaron said in his podcast about the way that Seth, talked at the end there, whenever he was telling him, And so that's why I put it in my notes when I was listening to their podcast, because I was like, yeah, it's exactly the word I was looking for, but couldn't find whenever I was writing my script. You know, like he goes into like he's dynamic. We've seen him do quite a few different things, but that was like a new gear for Milchek, I thought, you know, of like, he was passing judgment, right?
Yeah, he was handing down judgment, everlasting damnation. You'll
be like, you never breathe a breath on this earth, I think is what the actual.
And that's like, may Kier's mercy follow you into the darkness, or I did.
Yeah.
Some crazy stuff. Very Revelations.
Very much.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of in Pulp Fiction, when we have Samuel L. Jackson doing that whole speech before he, kills those kids eating the burgers.
Right.
That's sort of his speech he does every time.
Lay my vengeance upon you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it was very biblical.
I'm looking through the comments real quick. Did you have anything else there, Aaron?
I think I'm out. I just can't wait to see next week. In fact, I think I'm going to watch it this weekend so I can start thinking about it. Oh,
yeah. And for those of you that are still here, next week I have a special guest. Jim will be here, not Aaron, but Quinn from Quinn's Ideas is going to be here.
You're talking to Quinn?
Too.
Quinn's awesome.
I am an unironic big fan. I'm subscribed to him.
Yeah, he's coming next week. If you want to join too, you can, Aaron, if all four.
I just wish I knew it. I would have swapped Jim, because I don't know, maybe Jim knows Quinn too.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible he might come from more than one, but he committed and locked down for next week at least. So we're gonna have him talking about it. Should be cool.
One thing I think has been really nice is that a lot of people didn't know about Robert in Deep Geek. Like, he wasn't watching it, and now I notice he's watching it. Like, a lot of creators are now sort of.
Yeah, I thought about sending him a message too. The only thing about
he's super nice.
Yeah, it's a time zone thing though. Like 9 p.m. Eastern is like a pretty bad time for anybody in the UK. But
oh yeah,
I don't know what I'm still thinking about it, because I've talked to Robert before and he always seemed like a super friend, and he's smart. I really like the content that he makes. And I saw the same thing you saw, that he had a Severance video. I was like, oh, I should send him a message. But
yeah, so I don't know, because I think I might have mentioned this to you when you were on my show, that I had done a live stream with him, and he was asking me what my favorite show of the year was that year, and I said, oh, Severance. And he's like, what's that show? I'm like, oh my God, it's amazing. Gotta watch it. What's better than House of the Dragon? I'm like, I think so.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's
for
wonderful.
Sure. I've noticed that same thing. Like, there's a lot, like in our fandom, and just I've seen it expand, because I think people heard like, oh man, that first season's so crazy and it's got but then it's been so long. But now that it's come back and people are like, it's just as good as it ever was, it's now starting to really get some like traction in people's, because there's so much competition out there.
Yeah, and they did I think they did a really good job of promotion for this, series too. And like, they did some really out of the box things, like the thing they did at the train station, and but they've been doing all those typical panels and that type of thing. So I don't remember any of that type of promotion for season 1. I think it was just on
for anything on Apple, except maybe Ted Lasso and the other one, the Jennifer Aniston one.
Yeah, so someone said, oh, there's this show, and then it's Ben Stiller and Adam Scott, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll try. It's sci-fi, okay. So but I didn't know anything about it. And also, Pete, it was probably, in a way, it was sort of fun going into it not knowing anything about it.
Yeah, that was the hook for me in the first season. I was like, why is this so good? Like, I started watching it and I started covering it right away, and I was like, kind of thinking, it's not going to be that great, because I didn't hear much about it. I mean, like, Ben Stiller being involved was like, I mean, I wasn't that familiar with him as a director. Like, I still thought of him as an actor, and like, that's not something that I would be like, oh, I got to check that out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think
it was a pretty big surprise.
It took me a couple weeks to get on it too, because I thought, with the pedigree, it was going to be much more of like a weird sci-fi office comedy, which is very funny. but
It
it's
is,
way
yeah.
more than that. So like once I started like, oh, this has got some like interesting, there's some wheels turning inside the show's head, then I'm like, oh yeah. But and it still is hilarious. The show is very funny, but not really a comedy.
Yeah, this was probably the least. This is probably where they dialed it back the most as far as like comedy, like just straight up funny.
If not for
stuff.
Dylan, there wouldn't be anything funny in this episode. Dylan once again bringing the goods.
Yeah, I thought that they still got a couple of them in there though. You know, like I thought Seth saying that this is the tallest waterfall on the planet.
Oh yeah, that was
a
awesome.
Great line.
Oh,
and Dylan saying, "Oh, that's smart about drowning out your twin brother's death by the waterfall."
I saw a lot of people talking about that
funny.
too. They were like, "Well, if it's so loud, how did they hear Helly at the end?" But I feel like that's one of those.
And what did Irv call Dylan when he was accusing him of blabbing his business? He said some kind of childish swear that really tickled me too.
He called him a dumbass.
Was that it? A dumbass? Like, what'd you say to him, dumbass? Like, it's a really.
It was very out of character. It was
exactly.
It was good. Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. We can. Both can do a plug again. You know, tell people where to find you. I guess just go. Heidi, you can go first since.
Sure. Well, I'm Heidi. Down. I have a YouTube channel called Costume Co. And I do analysis of different shows through like a costume lens, just sort of showing how costumes can tell a story. It's sort of like art direction or music. By the way, the music was really excellent this episode too. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. So feel free to follow me over there and say hi. And thanks, Pete, for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And we're gonna do something on your channel.
Yes,
soon,
excellent.
Right?
Yes, in maybe mid-season with Tony Teflon. I'm hoping to hook you guys up together.
Mid-season is next week.
Yeah, maybe the week after we can do it.
So be on the lookout for that. Aaron?
Yeah, I'm Aaron. I do podcasts with my buddy Jim over at baldmove.com, BALD move.com. We're covering Severance right now. We're about to start up Yellow Jacket season 3. We're doing this. We got a big year this year. We got Andor. We got Night of the Seven Kingdoms. We got The Last of Us 2. We got Daredevil, The Return of Daredevil. We also have a Star Trek podcast. We started watching every Star Trek starting from the beginning with our producer Talitha. It's a good time. Wow. We have a lot of fun over there at baldmove.com.
Yeah, there's quite a few things coming up. I don't know. I definitely thought about doing Yellow Jackets again and the White Lotus, and I pretty much just hyper focused on Severance right now. So I think I'm gonna let those slip. Maybe do one at the end or something like that. You know, just an ending video. But
yeah,
we've been waiting for something, and now all of a sudden it's all coming at the exact same time.
Floodgates, man. The floodgates.
So, that's going to do it for us this week. You'll be back in 2 weeks for episode 6. This is the next time people can tune in to see you for sure. Like I said, Heidi, you and I are going to get together on your channel soon. And then maybe there'll be a spot where we can bring you back in the second half.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah. And so thanks for everyone that came out. Thanks for the super chats.
Thanks for having me. It's great to meet you, Heidi.
Oh, very nice to meet you too, Aaron. And you have a beautiful voice, by the way. Like nice
that's lovely.
Like
that's lovely view.
For podcasting, your podcast probably sounds amazing.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah, you should check it out.
I'm jealous of your on-air light. That's really cool.
Oh, you know what? Honestly, I got it on Amazon.
Did you? Yeah, I need to get one. So, because like you saw my kid walked in and was like, "Hey, Dad, what's?" Because I don't usually work this late, and I'm like, "I'm doing a show." I didn't
catch it.
Yeah, I slapped the mute when I saw him coming down the hallway.
It was funny though. I had to get a dimmer for it. Like I had to get call on a few of my YouTube friends. So I was like, "What do I do?" Like it was just like boom, like a beacon.
Yeah, just blowing. Your lighting out.
So I'm learning.
All right. So yeah, thanks for everyone for coming out. We'll be here again for every episode this season. Same time, same place. And these guys will switch up, but we'll probably see them both again. So that's about it for today. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.